aspect of the society. And that is one of the things that I'm very passionate that through the Leadership Academy, we'll be able to equip ourselves, train ourselves to make sure that this fulfill that purpose in our lives, in our society in general, and also the Black community. So I want to thank the speakers. We have seasoned speakers from different healthcare professional groups, and we're hoping that they're going to give us the best of what they have. And I want to thank you once again for making our time this Saturday morning to be part of this meeting. Hopefully we're going to have another section sometime in September. So it's going to be building up on what we have. And we welcome your feedback. If you have anything that you want to support with the team that are organizing this, most especially Professor Jaiyesimi is taking up the role to coordinate this academy. So we are looking for people that will also help to support this academy. So let's make it a big academy so that we can equip and we'll start spreading it, not just within the United Kingdom, across the world. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Agbo, my president. The very first speaker is Professor Dilly Anumba, who is a professor of Obstetrics and Gynaecology at the University of Sheffield. Professor Anumba is the first Nigerian to be appointed Professor of Obstetrics and Gynaecology. He wears many hats. He is a member of council of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. He's a professor in one of the universities in South Africa. But I'm not going to go the Nigerian way where I'm going to go on and on and on about the accolades of people, but just to let you know that the lineup today are people who are they're worth their weight in gold. So Professor Dilly will be speaking to us about leading global health initiatives. So Dilly, thank you for joining us and thank you for agreeing to take part. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Jaiyesimi, Rotimi, my friend. It's my privilege and honor to speak to you on this topic. What I'll do is share my screen now, if I may, and then share with you some few thoughts. So I'll do that straight away. Okay, let me do desktop. Great. So here we are. So I've been asked to speak about leading global health initiatives and perhaps share with you some thoughts around my own experience and lessons that I have learned running an NIHR-funded research group on preterm birth in low middle income countries. So I'll briefly go through the program background, particularly the pre-program development, which is around what some of you might be interested in if you want to venture into either global health or in fact academic research generally. I'll mention the work strands only because it might illustrate some of the leadership concepts and thoughts that I have personally learned from this engagement. I'll talk about some exemplars in terms of outputs from the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary working of my group. And I'll round up by just mentioning some of the lessons that I have learned for the benefit of any others who might wish to engage in such endeavor. So first of all, I think the key thing about global health research leadership or research leadership in any area is really to identify the specific health research problem or question that you'd like to interrogate and answer. And for me, the health research problem was around the challenge of managing preterm birth, which, as you know, affects about 50 million pregnancies globally with more than 1 million deaths per annum. It's more prevalent in low middle income countries, which therefore means that there is a need for better mitigation of of preterm birth in low middle income countries. And if you look at the global epidemiology, the estimated number of preterm births is highest in some of these countries that you can see here: Nigeria, Bangladesh, I mentioned. Many of them are low middle income countries, quite apart from the more populous countries of the world like India and China. So that was the research problem that I'd been addressing in the United Kingdom. And this particular project was around taking it on a more global stage, using some of the experiences that I have learned from my research in the UK. And the real problem with preterm parturition research is that preterm birth is a syndrome. It's not one condition. There are many reasons why a baby can be born too soon. And this is illustrated. I'll skim through this because obviously this is not necessarily an ONG audience, but there are many reasons why a baby can be born too soon. And therefore, that does pose challenges in terms of the research that you do, because there are so many things you can begin to address, and it becomes even more difficult when you're looking at it from a low middle income country setting. And this is a lay description of some of the aims and objectives of the research that we did. So again, the second learning point is, if you want to engage in any form of research, in any form of leadership, in any form of global health work, you need to have clear aims and objectives. And these were the things we set out to answer. What were the issues, gaps, and opportunities for preventing preterm birth? And being an obstetrician, my focus was always around preventing it rather than necessarily always mitigating it. How can we improve prevention and care for preterm birth in low middle income countries? And given the higher burden of infections in preterm in low middle income countries, could infections in those settings be contributing? And what's the sort of training or capacity development opportunities that we can explore for mothers and health staff? And if the baby is born too soon, can skin to skin, which is where the mother carries the baby on her bosom for as long as 24 hours every day, if at all possible, how can it be best used? How and why and when? Because this has been evidenced to improve birth survivals for premature babies. And of course, the issue of resource limitations in low middle income countries. What are the things that we can do around the health economics? So we set about looking for a network. So again, when you're wanting to do research, when you want to lead a research group or lead a research, or any group for that matter, you do need to develop a partnership. And these are the members of the partnership that we eventually developed after lots and lots of traveling and lots of conversations. So we worked across UK, South Africa, Cape Town and Pretoria, Dhaka, Bangladesh, with researchers there, and some collaborations from researchers in Nigeria, but also we were joined by researchers in India. And it was essentially a very interdisciplinary group. So the first thing I did was to identify key leaders in those settings, who then identified their own groups as well. And before we knew it, we had a partnership that had more than 50 people. We had health economists, we had basic scientists, we had anthropologists, we had clinicians like me, and we had pediatricians, etc. So it was quite an exciting group. By way of funding, this was where the work was most difficult, was actually getting funding for the research that we planned. What happened was that we had initial funding from the Academy of Medical Sciences that gave myself and a professor in Cape Town some money to have a networking engagement. And then we're funded in the neighborhood of 2.5 million from the National Institute for Health Research. And I based everything on previous work that I'd been doing in the UK that was funded by the Medical Research Council and the EPSRC. And during the work, because I was keen to engage more with Nigeria, we also got Research England funding, through which we did some sub-studies in a number of countries, starting out with India and Nigeria, etc. So the next thing you need to do is to develop a program strategy. And I guess that comes out from when you actually write your grants. What are you actually going to be studying? What are your aims and objectives? And that's pretty much the same for any collaboration. And then thirdly, what strategy are you going to use? And this is a little diagram that I developed that summarizes the work that NIHR Prime did. Where is the evidence gap from literature? Because preterm birth being a big problem, as opposed to a focused problem, we needed to know where the gaps were in LMIC settings. What do the stakeholders recommend that need to be done? And what's the context in terms of LMICs? And how do we conduct the research? Then we develop interventions and then advocate uptake and scale up. It was a very ambitious program because it was a huge topic. So we started out by addressing the evidence synthesis or interrogating literature to understand exactly what had been done. And we wanted to know what had been done in low-middle income countries. So again, a lot of work went into that. And then we looked at engaging with the stakeholders in low-middle income countries. So you're wanting to engage in global health research, you do need to ensure that you engage those stakeholders to actually prioritize what is needed there. So you can't just sit in the United Kingdom and tell them what you think they need to have done, but also you need to co-develop interventions with them. And then we did some social science work based on their prioritized challenges around adolescent health, which I'll talk about briefly. Based on my research, we did some pathophysiology work, and we were keen to mitigate preterm birth in those when it happened, looking, as I told you before, around kangaroo mother care, skin to skin. We were also keen to have some relatively immediate impact by developing niche guidelines for very specific things for which there was no global health guidance or, in fact, local guidance. And we were keen on the education and training. So this whole piece of work started in 2018 and lasted about 4 years. And we had these pictures just tell us what we did in Bangladesh when we were prioritizing research. So this was our team in Bangladesh having some brainstorming. We're speaking to mothers, many of whose babies were born preterm. We're talking to hospital workers, and we had lots and lots of stakeholder meetings, policy planners. So we got a view around what was actually required. And we did very similar things in Cape Town, South Africa, and Pretoria. And these are some of the projects, including the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, and again with mothers, with midwives and neonatologists, etc. So with funding from Research England in the neighborhood of about 100K, we developed some work around prioritizing research for indicated preterm birth, the commonest of which is from pregnancy hypertension in Nigeria at Babcock. And again, we had major meetings, very exciting meetings with stakeholders. And secondarily in Kano, where we met with lots of people from the Bayero University, Kano, and engaged with the communities there. And also, one of the key things we wanted to do was looking at infectious causes of preterm birth, the prime of which would be malaria. And this was also with the MI of Kano when we paid our homages to him. So in terms of whatever you do in global health, community engagement is vital. And it's important to speak to key people, key opinion leaders. And the MI of Kano at the time, before he was demeted, spoke about his passion for the girl child and the challenges of empowering girl children with education. So again, if you're doing work, do think about your outputs. Ask from the very beginning, what do you want to have as an output? And this is just a summary of some of the outputs from our evidence synthesis. As an academic, I was keen, of course, that we published. So we published in BMJ Open, we just published in Journal of Global Health and a range of others, including our Nigeria work will be published in Journal of Global Health. So think about your outputs ab initio. And similarly, I told you that we try to prioritize adolescent pregnancy. When we started this project, this wasn't what I was thinking of. But again, the stakeholders and the researchers in the context where we were working said that this was a huge problem that had major impact. And so we again looked at adolescent sexual and reproductive health in Gauteng province of South Africa. where we spoke to the mothers, the girls themselves, the families, the communities, and again had some outputs. Eventually, we culminated that work in stakeholder dissemination meetings where we tried to get intersectoral buy-in to the findings of our research by engaging with the Department of Basic Education, the Department of Social Security, and the Department of Health. And this was our little meeting where we met with the regional people to tell them what we found and to discuss where we take it from. So again, on this adolescent theme, we did similar work with in India, where we developed some really excellent partnership in the last 2 years of Prime. We focused on adolescent nutrition. So you can see we're looking at adolescent health, adolescent nutrition. And again, we spoke to community social science research, underpinned a lot of the work. And again, we had some outputs by way of publications in +1 and a number that is currently under review in the British Journal. So again, we had outputs, and I'll tell you exactly what happened after that. And we've talked about adolescent mothers' experiences of preterm birth in Bangladesh. Most of these women had babies at home, and we really found some really interesting things, which we ultimately are publishing in BMC Pregnancy and Childbirth. Until we had consultative workshops where we then developed some interventions for this, and that's another chapter of work that we hope to do in due course. We looked at delayed cord clamping. Those of us who are in obstetric gynecology or pediatrics will know that delayed cord clamping is an evidenced intervention to improve outcomes for preterm babies. We looked at it from a health systems perspective in Bangladesh, again, thinking about things that will make some impact. And we did some more work around kangaroo mother care. So just moving on to some of the other things we did, because as I said, it was a relatively ambitious project, was in Nigeria with additional funding. And we did some work around implementation of interventions to stop malaria in pregnancy and therefore reduce the contribution of malaria in pregnancy to preterm deliveries. And we did that in Babcock. The reason I show this picture is again to show that you can co-develop interventions when you involve local government health authorities. And we had our workshops where the local government practitioners engaged with us, and when we developed the research that we eventually did. We were keen to, when you're working in global health, the key thing that people want to see is that you're thinking of impact, you're thinking of things that can make a difference. And a low-hanging fruit for us was around developing guidelines. And again, we didn't want to reproduce what the WHO or whoever else was doing. We wanted to do something that was niche. And therefore, part of our stakeholder prioritization exercises included identifying 2 guidelines that we wanted to develop, which is shown on this slide. And the first of this was around a global health manual for preterm birth risk assessment, which is almost non-existent in low middle income countries and in many middle income countries as well. So this culminated in this manual, which is open access and is available for a download freely, or a hard copy can be bought by Amazon or wherever. We also then developed guidance for community kangaroo mother care, because in low middle income countries, sometimes the low birth weight babies go home pretty much to die because they are discharged prematurely and families didn't know how to look after them. So we're keen to develop guidance around community kangaroo mother care. That's ended up providing us with some training board games, guidelines, and some resources. So that was just some examples here. I'm just sort of skimming through. We were keen, as was said, about guidelines to develop pregnancy risk assessment modalities. And we wanted to look at infections for preterm birth. And therefore, part of the key things we did was to recruit the right staff, postdoctoral scientists who knew what they were doing. And these are some of the works from my postdocs in partnership with myself and a number of others, where we looked at placental infections. We looked at the genes that are upregulated and downregulated, from which we have identified some new biomarkers for preterm birth, which we are trying to capitalize on now. And a number of us, these postdocs and bright guys, including a Nigerian who's worked with me since his PhD days, and we published quite profusely on the subject of biomarkers for preterm birth based on work we've done in the low-middle-income countries. One of the works that enabled me to venture into global health was stuff we were doing around new devices for predicting preterm birth, and that's just summarized here by a number of our publications. The cervical impedance device that's about to hopefully be commercialized, CE marking is being sought. And my dream has always been that this will be something that is cost beneficial in low-middle-income countries. So we've had discussions across the patch around the acceptability of a device of that sort, which would be novel and which is, and current devices for predicting preterm birth are pretty much not available in low-middle-income countries. So these were just snapshots of some of the work we did. At the end, the key things around the impact of some of these things, and we were keen to, we have a concept, a theory of change framework for assessing impact, but the bottom line was that at the end, we were keen to have stakeholder meetings again with various groups. And these you can see were community nurses and midwives in the Cape Town area. This was when the entire team came to Sheffield for a wrap-up meeting. And these were stakeholder meetings in Bangladesh where we had teachers. We did a lot of work around adolescent nutrition through schools. And these were the teachers that helped us to deliver the curriculum that we developed. So global health, especially if you're doing that, it's very multidisciplinary. So that's your take-home message. It's about capitalizing on strengths from other people. Don't feel you know it all. Recognize that there are things you don't know, and getting the best people to work with you to make it happen. And these are some of the dissemination news items in various press, including a national television audience in Bangladesh with one of their national TV stations talking about preterm birth. And we had quite a lot of local press. I had nothing to do with it. It was just my partners that were very engaged with the work that we did and were very passionate about it. And they made sure that local people knew about what we were doing with them. We had a lot of conferences as well, again, led by a number of people. We published extensively over the last 4 years with up to 4 full publications and about 15 that are either submitted or in print. So in summary, what we've done was to publish evidence of interventions that can mitigate preterm birth. We mapped published evidence to identify priority gaps. We engage with stakeholders, especially focusing on adolescent health because they prioritize that. And this required community and school-based research, and we had developed educational tools at the end. Our work on biomarkers and point-of-care test approaches appropriate for LMICs is ongoing. We published guidance, we've developed training resources. The last year of our work was around integrating implementation and improvement of health systems by ensuring that all we did involved policy planners. What are the pros of the work we've done? We avoided disciplinary silos, so we had social scientists talking to biologists. The cons, as always, is not enough time and not enough money. Rome wasn't built in a day. We strengthened research capacity because if you're doing that sort of work, you do need to develop new researchers that can sustain the vision post-project. We had a good number of postdocs, 5 PhD students, many of whom worked in low-middle income countries. So just to end, what are the experiences in global health research leadership? What are the top tips, if you can call them top tips? They're just tips anyway, they're not necessarily top. I would say to you, choose your collaborators wisely, and we don't have time to discuss the nuances of this, but be careful who you choose. That's if you have the option of choice. Oftentimes you work with who comes. Look at their reputation, look at their skill set, make sure they're complementary. Make sure they are engaged, find out what they are in need for. Make sure they have a collaborative ethos. In other words, not about just me, it's about working together. If you can determine that they are transparent and honest people, then that's helpful. And it's important to get people who truly work hard. Now, the institution is important. Make sure they have institutional support for what they say to you they want to do. And you can gauge that when you're writing your grants or developing the project by how much the line managers support them. Make sure your partnerships are equitable. In other words, treat them as equals. The fact that you happen to be living in the United Kingdom by dint of luck does not make you any bigger than any of them. And they come with skill sets that you don't have. And they're working with, they're actually the authorities of research that you're doing in the setting, because they work in those contexts. They know what the problems are, and they know how to meet those problems. Promote excellence and also think impact. What's the end point? Quite apart from publications and esteem and kudos. What is it how's that going to change the life of men, women, and children, for example, in my own specialty? Think about sustainability, even if you can't always achieve that, but think about it. Have goals, very clear goals, and work collaboratively and try to aim for success. Recruit as much support as you can. There'll be people who will work well, give them more jobs. There are those who are not going to do much work, gently but politely keep them away from the main task, the results. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for keeping to time, Professor Anumba, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. We're looking forward to the groundbreaking device that you are working on, which is almost ready to go into the market. You've taken us through a journey of what you've done, the extensive work you've done globally, and we commend you for that. And I believe there will be questions. So if there are questions now, we'll take it. Ideally, I'm going to plead to all our panelists to please stay till the end, because there might be more questions. But if you have to go, today's Saturday, we will understand. So if there are any questions, there's none in the chat room, and I haven't seen any electronic hand raised yet. But let me ask Dilly. The question is, you're Black. You've gone global. You've mentioned having grants of over £2 million. Why have people trusted you? Why have you been able to break the barriers and be able to get into this field in terms of people trusting you? If they didn't trust you, they wouldn't have given you the money to do what you've done. So why you? And I ask that question so that you can share the skills we need to be able to, when we go to the table to ask for funds, that people listen to us and give it to us. That's one of the barriers we have as a community. So what have you done differently, Professor Anumba?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rotimi. That's a hard question to answer, but actually, I think the key thing with research is around hard work. It's around perseverance. For each grant I get, there are easily 5, 6, 7 grants that I did not get. So the short answer is hang in there and keep writing those grants and keep seeking, knocking on those doors. Many of the doors will not open for whatever reason, but I guess what I've done is to keep knocking. When you stop knocking, then no door opens. If you knock on the first 5 and miss the 6th one that was going to open, then you're never going to have any doors open. So the one thing I can say to you is perseverance is one. The second is hard work. It's really hard graft. And people are going to think you're a little bit crazy. It doesn't have to be research. Whatever you're doing, if you put in a good shift, perhaps, more of a shift than most other people who have other privileges, let's put it that way. Inevitably, at some point, you will have some successes that then endear you to others. So for purposes of global health, I guess the main reason was the fact that we'd achieved a few things on the UK research arena. And so when I required institutional backing and I required backing, I could say these are the things we've achieved with the 3, 4, 5 million we had won for grants in the UK. So you become more credible the more you succeed, but the only way you'll succeed is graft and graft and graft, and never take no for an answer. Believe in yourself and keep going. Recruit help from as many people as are willing to work with you. There will be those who will not want to work with you for whatever reason. Bypass them and go to the next person until such a person wants to work with you. There are people that I probably did ask to collaborate with me, and a couple of emails maybe that were never answered because they didn't think it was going anywhere. And I can tell you that there were some, once I got the money, they started coming back, people who didn't reply my email before. So it's about pushing on and seeing where it gets you. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you for that. So it's about resilience, it's about knocking on the door, it's about believing in yourself. We've all been trained. Just one brief, let's see. Yeah, there is a question in the chat room from Anu Obaro. How long did it take to prepare your NIHR grant application? And how many, if any, failed applications did you have? You had made some reference to that. Anu is asking you, how long did it take you to prepare your grant application? And I think while answering that question, if you can signpost us into how we can write grants so that it's of a good standard to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good question. So my first major global health grant, I've been trying with minor things, but my first global health grant was unsuccessful 6 months earlier. And it's interesting because that original grant I wrote with some Nigerian partners. It was unsuccessful, so I went back again, learning from what I had picked up from the first approach. But by the time I wanted to do the second grant, a number of people who ran the first one with me had either jackpot or whatever, or the others just gave up and felt, hang on, it's not going to work. I allowed him to write this grant with us first time, he didn't get it, so I better move on to other things. And so I got new partners, and it was the second one that was successful. But now, the reason I say that is, again, to say that perseverance is important. And if you don't have staying power when it comes to, doing stuff like this, you're not going to be very successful. So don't take no for an answer. Listen to the criticism. Don't blame it on your race or your color or whatever defining character, or the fact you're a woman or a man or whatever. Look very critically at the feedback you get and turn it around again and expand it and make it better. So I got these big grants with the second attempt. So the first one was a £1.5 million grant, which I didn't get. When I wrote back, it was a £2 million grant, which I got, which was then supplemented by another £500,000. And then after that, I got a few more grants that totaled about 300, 400, 500,000 pounds. So yeah, keep going until you make a success of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the last question to yourself, and I'll also plead to you to please stay through the meeting if you can. It's from Pelumi, who says, any suggestions or advice for foundation doctors looking to get involved in global health? Like we said, we're trying to build younger ones to get them involved in leadership in whatever field they choose. So that's a question for you as to foundation doctors or junior doctors. And not just junior doctors, junior nurses, junior physiotherapists, healthcare professionals generally.
Excellent. That's a very, very good question, Anu, and I'm really grateful that you asked it. So the answer is I'm very passionate about, as you imagine, early career researchers, early career doctors. The bottom line is there are many opportunities. So start small. Let's say if you live in the UK, start with a project that is in the UK. Try and get your name on some other publications, on some quality improvement projects in the general area that you will see your career panning out into, so that even if it's a few lines on your CV saying you are interested in that particular area, then it helps you. If you're a foundation year doctor, what I would suggest is that you do so in the specialty where you will want to eventually qualify in. You might not, because obviously you may not be very clear where you want to become, but then try, if at all possible, to do it in that specialty or in the research area. So start with the UK. I started with the UK because I live here. I wish I started it when I was a foundation doctor in Nigeria, but I didn't have that opportunity. But you guys have the future ahead of you. The world is your oyster. Start immediately developing projects, doing little things here and there. Get your name on some publications. Get your name on some quality improvement projects, even if they're not into any publication yet. Having done so, begin to look out for invitations to be engaged with global health work. It could potentially start out with literature reviews on specific topics in a low middle income country, building on what you've done in the UK. And having done that, then it makes you more competitive for research posts in global health, for example. And there are now so many global health research groups and settings where you can actually apply, and they'll be looking at what background you have. And then one thing then leads to another. If you don't get into a major research grouping initially, you can start out with various NGOs, start doing some little work here and there, again, trying to find your niche and find what makes you happy. But also look for mentors. I think that's so important. Get someone or get some people who are interested in that area of work. They don't have to be in your specialty. Find someone who can inspire you or help you or tell you little things here and there that will point you in the right direction. They might actually send an email to someone else who's actually involved in the area that you want to work in. So those are the few words. We can have a complete session of this on another day, but that's so important.
Lovely. So thank you, Professor Dilly Anumba, for that very insightful presentation and for the work you've done. It's inspirational. We're going to go on to the next speaker. We are keeping to time as promised. Each speaker has 20 minutes to deliver their thoughts with us, and then we have a 10-minute question and answer session. The next person who's going to speak is Chinyama Okunuga, who I do know. Most people call her Chin, but her full name is Chinyama Okunuga. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Whittington Health NHS Trust. When you are Chief Operating Officer, you are the driving or the driver of that system. You are in charge of that system. Chin, I have known for perhaps about 10 years. When she started, or when she was a manager at Basildon University Hospital, moved through the ranks, and is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Whittington Health NHS Trust. She's going to talk to us about getting to the boardroom, and as Americans will say, the C-suite. How do you get to that executive board level? In spite of your gender, in spite of your color, what have you done differently that has enabled you to get to that position? I would want you to just say a little bit about your background, because you are Okunuga, but that doesn't make you originally Nigerian. You are Nigerian now. You cannot dispute that. But I would want to know where you come from when you open up. I don't want to tell people that. But I must thank you for coming on board to share your experience with us. I think it's interesting because women face a lot of discrimination. Your color also is an issue. So you've got two things against you. And you dress very well, which some people are envious about. That's another thing. So over to you, Chin.
Thank you, Professor Jaiyesimi. I call him Big Bro, so it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. It's a long story, and some of the things that Professor Anumba talked about actually resonate with my own journey. So it's really interesting to see the parallel between the clinical and research of fellow colleagues and what happens, I think, in management or executive posts. So as Prof. Rotimi said, my name is Chinyama Okunuga. Everybody calls me Chin. So originally I'm from Zambia. I've actually just come back. I've just been back 3 days. I was in Zambia for the last 2 weeks. I am married to my husband called Okunuga. He is from Ijebu, and I go to Nigeria more times than I go to Zambia. So a lot of people actually think that I am Nigerian. So as Prof said, I am now a Nigerian. I have mannerisms of a Nigerian, everybody tells me. We are blessed with 2 children. My oldest is 27 and my younger son is 24. So really, really blessed by what God has done. So my journey into an executive role really didn't start intentionally, I have to say. It started about 29 years ago. I was just looking back at my CV and other things whilst I was preparing for this chat. I want to call it a chat so that we can have a proper conversation about what it feels like, what it's like, and as Prof said, what it's like to be a woman, a Black woman, an African woman. And at the time that I started getting senior positions, people thought I was a young woman. So a young Black woman of African descent. So a number of obstacles were already in place. So my journey, as I said, started off about 29 years ago when I joined the NHS. And for those who recall, we had GP Fund Holding. So my very first position post-graduation was a GP Fund Holding position where I worked for a number of years. And whilst working there, I realized that particularly as a Black woman, particularly as a Black person, I couldn't just get promotion for the hard work that I was doing. So I know Professor Anumba talked about work hard, and yes, that I think most of us who are Black really do work hard. I look at a number of us, probably a number of people who are on this panel, and they can talk about how hard the work. But working hard alone was not the recognition that led me to where I am. I think it was also taking on opportunities that presented themselves, being ready to jump up for positions that came up. About 10 jobs later, so I have moved about 10 times. 10 years ago, as Professor Jaiyesimi said, I moved to Basildon. But through all of that, I made sure that I was going to a place that was going to support me in what I wanted to do. So my aim wasn't really to become an executive, to have an executive position, not initially anyway. So I started off working in posts where I knew that I was getting support. Interestingly, a lot of the support that I got was from white managers, female managers, not even male managers, white female managers. And this is a story that I always tell. Make sure that you're working with somebody that collaborates or supports what you're doing. I have worked in a number of organizations, as I've said. I have worked in what we now call ISBs, which were called primary care trusts in the past. I've worked at 2 ambulance services. London Ambulance Service was the first ambulance service that I worked in when I went into projects. So initially my job was in information technology, being on the IT support desk. I then got an opportunity to work as a project manager following support from one of my colleagues, one of my managers, into doing a project management course. At the time, we used to do Prince 2. There's several that somebody can take. So I did Prince 2, got the qualification. An opportunity came to do a project manager role at Whipscross Hospital, which is now part of Barts in the London. I went and did that job. Then I moved on to London Ambulance Service. Whilst at the London Ambulance Service, where I worked for a couple of years, and that was towards 1999, the director of ops moved to Surrey Ambulance Service. And when he got there, actually, he called in and approached me and said, there's an opportunity to come and work in Surrey Ambulance Service. It would be really good for you to come. There's a job that's going to be advertised. I applied for the job and I got a job at Surrey Ambulance Service. I worked there for a number of years. I got sponsorship from that organization to do my master's, which I did whilst there. I moved from there to come closer to home because my son, who I just talked about, was starting primary school. So I started working in a primary care trust as a choice lead. Do you remember when we had a choice for patients? I started working there. Several years later, which is probably 2.5 years, an opportunity came to work at Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital. And that was to lead on taking care 24/7. Clinicians who are on the call probably are aware that if a patient is admitted to hospital, particularly in the urgent emergency care pathway towards the end of the week, the likelihood of their results, their outcomes being poorer than those who are admitted earlier in the week are worse. And that role was really to encourage looking after patients the same way that we look after them at the start of the week and at the end of the week, how we look after them during the day and during the night, how we look after them during the weekday and during the weekend. I worked there for a number of years. In that role, I think Professor talked about it and Professor Jaiyesimi also talked about it. I came across my first issue around race and equality. Somebody came to work for me, reporting into me, and 6 months later, I realized that this person was getting paid more than I was getting paid. My first wake-up call, that actually there is something about race, and in the NHS then it was worse than it is. So I'm sure that people have come across these situations, whether it's about getting a grant, whether it's doing research, whether it's about promotion. That was the first time that somebody who was junior to me was getting paid more than I was. And I thought I had a really good working relationship with the head of that particular area that I was working in. I was devastated at the thought of that. And I thought, what else can I do? How can I make sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else? And my quest for equality started from my job working at Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital. I moved on from GSTT. I still have a working relationship because I decided to address that issue, that issue of inequality that I experienced at that time in terms of pay. I still have a working relationship with the person who was my manager, and actually it was somebody who worked as a gynecologist. It was a consultant. She was working at the time as a deputy medical director for GSTT. I moved from there following an interest that I developed whilst at GSTT for operational work. I worked with a number of people, of course, to try and develop taking care 24/7, and some of those were operational people like general managers that maybe clinicians will have heard about, general managers, service managers. A role came up at North Middlesex Hospital for a general manager for surgery, cancer, and anesthetics and theatres. I applied for that job, and I remember coming home to say to my husband that I've applied for a job, and his first response was, "They're not going to give you that job, Chin. You don't have equal experience, and you're young, you're black, you're female." But I went for the interview, and for reasons that only they know, I was offered that job. So I worked at North Middlesex for about 4.5 years. The chief the chief exec at North Middlesex left and worked in Basildon. Professor Jaiyesimi will know that as soon as that,
are you blind? This is dirty.
Was there for about 2 weeks, 2 months maybe. CQC came in and found real issues in their pediatric services. That service got a real bad rating from CQC. And one of the things that the chief exec did as soon as that came out was she reached out to people that she knew that could help turn around the service. So she approached me and said to me that they've got headhunters that will be phoning around to speak to people. There's an opportunity to go to Basildon as a general manager for women's services and for pediatrics, which is the service that was affected by the CQC result. Applied for the job, got that job, and that's where I met Professor Jaiyesimi. I was there for a number of years, I think 4 years in total. One of the things that I hope Professor Jaiyesimi will also hold to was that I reached out and worked beyond what my role is. And that is one place where I found that working and building relationships was a really important factor when it came to building your rapport and building your experience, but also building your reputation. I worked with women and children's services. We turned around that service. And within 18 months, and I don't think I'm wrong in saying that it was the first or second service in the country where, following a really bad outcome for CQC, turned to be outstanding within a number of months. So that service moved to outstanding. I was then asked to go and lead a service within Basildon Hospital, which was the emergency division. And I did that and worked through A&E, not knowing that was preparing me for the next job that I was going to take. So after being at Basildon for about 3-4 years, an opportunity came up at Eastern North Herts in Hertfordshire, at the Lister Hospital, for a Deputy Chief Operating Officer. I applied for that job and was successful and started that job in 2017. As we all know, 2019 or 2020, the pandemic hit. So I was there as the first Deputy Chief Operating Officer at Arts Trust. Within 2 years of that, the role slightly changed and my role became Managing Director for Unplanned Care. During the pandemic, as we all know, the pandemic was labeled as an emergency response. I was responsible for emergency planning within the organization. So a lot of the work, particularly the management of the response for COVID, was coming through my desk. So during that period of the pandemic, for almost 2 years, I worked nonstop, 7 days a week. Took up responsibilities that I wasn't responsible for, but did that gracefully, I hope. During that time, of course, we saw the impact that COVID had on ethnic minority people. Several times we had Zoom meetings talking about the impact. We had Zoom meetings talking about the vaccine reluctancy that Black people had. I became the expert within the Hertfordshire area, talking about the impact that COVID had on Black and ethnic minority people. Professor Jaiyesimi, I think, attended several of our Zoom meetings to try and talk from a clinical point of view about the impact and how Black people were feeling and Black people were responding to the pandemic. At the end of, or when we were coming out of the second or third wave of the pandemic, my then boss, who was the Chief Operating Officer, announced to me that she was going to be taking up a new role in Surrey as the Chief Exec, and she didn't see any reason why I couldn't take on the new post as a Chief Operating Officer for Eastern North Herts Trust. And that was in January 2022 when that announcement was made. So between that time and the time that we had interviews, I started preparing myself. So one of the things that I did was I reached out to everybody. I have a whole notebook of people that I spoke to. So Professor Anumba talked about keep knocking, keep doing, keep talking to people. I spoke to everybody from NHS England. I spoke to people regionally. I spoke to people within the organization, preparing myself in an organization that had worked for 5 years, had proven myself, had done more than what my job description talks about, and to prepare myself for this role. That interview happened in February 2022. But a few days before my 50th birthday, there was confidence everywhere that I was going to get that job. The people on the panel are people that I've worked with. Somebody actually had worked at Basildon with myself and Professor Jaiyesimi. Actually, two of the other people that I'd worked with at the Lister Hospital. It was a done deal as far as everybody else was concerned. I had the interview, came home that afternoon, got a call from the chief executive and said to me, "I'm really sorry, Chin, but we haven't given you the job." The disappointment that comes after you have proven yourself for 5 years cannot even be explained. I went away for my 50th birthday, came back, and there was strained relationship between myself and other senior colleagues within the organization. And I remember saying to myself, I know Professor Anumba said, don't think about it as it's because of your color. Don't think about it because of your gender or anything else. I knew that I had the experience and the skill and the reputation to do that job and do it well. And that was almost, I felt like it was a slap in my face. So the strained relationship between myself and the chief exec was very visible, that everybody was saying to me, "Chin, what is happening between you and the chief exec?" And I said, "Nothing is happening. I'm just waiting for my feedback." I remember the day, 8 weeks after the interview, that he was ready to give me the feedback. I went into his office, and I remember from a personal and professional point of view, I said to myself, I'm really going to want to understand what has happened with him. I walked into the room, and for some reason I thought to myself, let me hear him out. And the feedback that I got was very superficial. And I decided at that point that I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to say thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the feedback. And I walked out of that office. I walked out of that office that morning. And in the afternoon, the same afternoon, I got a call from headhunters saying to me, there's an opportunity that has come up at the Whittington Health for Chief Operating Officer. Your name has come up and we want you to apply. And so my process to apply for the Chief Operating Officer of Whittington started. I decided at that point that I was not going to share that news with anybody. The only person who knew at my workplace was my secretary, was my PA, because she was arranging some of the discussions that I was having, pre-interview discussions and meetings, and she was, and the other people who knew obviously were my family, my husband and my children. I had my interview in June of 2022, and of course we're sitting here because I was appointed as Chief Operating Officer. 3 lessons for me, which I wanted to share with colleagues on this call, was take the opportunity as it appears. Sometimes it doesn't always come on a platter, but take an opportunity as it appears to you. If you can do the job, 70% of it, go and apply for a job. Research shows that, particularly for us as Black people, we look at jobs, and if we cannot take 100% of the requirements, then we don't apply for the job. If you can take 70% of them, I sometimes even say to people, if you can take 60% of the job requirements, please apply for that job. The worst that they will do is say no. But the opportunity that you'll have had in writing that, and the skill that you will get by writing that application, and if you're lucky enough to be shortlisted for the interview, you will get that interview skill that you require. So 60-70% of the job, if you meet the requirement, please go ahead and apply for it. Jump up and take the opportunity. The other thing that had helped me through all of this was getting a mentor and a coach. I know that most organizations now will point you to NHS Select, where you can get a free coach, particularly if you're in a senior role, but you can get a mentor if you're in a more junior role. Whether it's a clinical position that you've got, for example, if you're a medical, a nurse, or an allied health professional, but also if you're in a management role and an admin role, please make sure that you get a mentor or a coach. And it's really important that you do that, particularly when you want to start moving on within your role. The other thing that is also important is dealing or overcoming prejudice. It is inevitable that you're going to get it. I gave one example. There's several that I went through in my role. There's one which was very clear when I worked in Surrey Ambulance, where I was told to go back to where I came from. Who do I think I am, being a Black person? What am I doing in that job? What am I doing in Surrey at the time? So that was very clear racism. Very clear prejudice, as I talked about, where somebody who was junior to me was getting paid more than I was getting paid. What also happened was a mixture of things, because the person who got the job at Eastern North Hearts had less experience than I did, but that person got a job. But then I worked through that, because the ultimate aim, whether you got a faith or not, the ultimate aim for me and the desire for me to be where I was for me to land at Whittington Health. The announcement of me getting the job at Whittington Health was far more than what I would have gotten if I'd gotten the job at Eastern North Hearts. The way that people took up that mantle and said, if Chin can do it, I can do it. And I always say to people, if I can do it, people can do it. There's hard work that goes through it. There's working more than you work. I always say to people that I mentor that you need to do the job that is the job up to you. So if you're band 7, for example, for those who know about bandings, do the job of a band 8A so that you get the skill and you're ready for your next promotion. It's really, really, really important that you do that. There are other things that I also did outside that role. I am a board member or governor at the London South East London Colleges, where I mentor, and I'm the lead governor for Equality and Diversity, where I lead discussions about inclusion and diversity within the college. But I'm also deputy chair for Proud to be Ops, where I encourage the representation of Black people into operational roles. There's very few of us. And I think if you look within the NHS currently, I think there's 2 Black females, and the other one is Shola, who's also a Nigerian, who's at Northmead. And I'm the second chief operating officer from a Black and ethnic minority who's female. So there is work still to be done, but I think we are getting somewhere with it. And just to end up on what Professor Anumba said, get your name on publications, of course, for research, that's really important, but also I think for operational roles. I have contributed to publicize a number of items that I can share on my CV, but also make sure that you're doing presentations about the work that you're doing, about things like I said about the impact of COVID on Black and ethnic minority people, why Black people were reluctant to take the vaccine, how have we moved on. It's really, really important to get your name out there, but make sure that you collaborate with people who support you. I hope that has inspired somebody and somebody has learned one thing or 2 things. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm also happy to send links to resources that people can look at that will help them move on.
Yeah, thank you, Chin. What a journey that has come to a very successful stage. I believe there are more things coming up for you. And thanks for being open. And one thing that came across in your talk, I applied. Similar to what Professor Anumba said. Yeah, you'll apply, they'll close the door, you won't get the job, don't get discouraged. And you also said working on building relationships. I think it's one of the things we as a group that don't do very well. Build a reputation. You just summarized it by saying, get your name out, lecture, publish, just like Prof said. Then go beyond what you're supposed to do. We as a people have to prove ourselves. So go beyond what you are told to do. That is your description. For as long as you're not putting patients at risk in terms of practicing beyond your expertise. Then you said, work beyond your job description. I think there is one question which I'll come to in a minute, but people are now talking about having white allies. I would want, at times I ask, why do I need a white ally? Shouldn't I get that job on merit rather than because I know John or I know Lucy? So if you can address the issue of white allies, that would be helpful. And there's a question here that says, what makes an effective leader and how do you deal with negative responses, reactions, challenges to your leadership? And as a mom, how do you balance it all?
Great questions. Let me start with the white ally issue. Whether we accept it or not, the greatest power within this country, within the NHS, is within white hands. So it's really, really important that you develop relationships with them because they're the ones who make most of the decisions. So we just talked about, and I think Professor Anumba talked about the fact that he's been in meetings where he's the only Black person. I can tell you the same thing, that several meetings, and that is the challenge that I always put within any system that I work in. The fact that you look around and there's one Black person, and I think that's okay. So the reality of where we are is that they hold the most power, they make the most decisions. The most decisions are not even made in an open forum. So you have to try and develop those relationships for them to speak your name in a place. So I mentioned several names whilst I was talking, giving my chat. And one of them is the CEO that both Professor Rotimi and I know, who tapped me on the shoulder to tell me there's a job that's coming. So the jobs were never given to me because I knew somebody, but they told me that the job was coming because that is what happens. Unfortunately, these networks have already been developed and we are just beginning to be part of that network. So what I have learned sitting at this senior level, and actually even in board meetings, where sometimes we'll be sitting at exec meetings, and they'll be talking about a role that is going to be developed, and they're already talking about somebody who's going to get into that job. The opportunity for me now is to look at other people who look like me and say, There is somebody called Shade there, or there's somebody there called Mwelo, or there's somebody there called Changa. You know, so you're placing the names in the rooms where usually our names are not mentioned. So I think allyship, whether we like it or not, is a really, really important aspect that we have to live with until there's more of us sitting at the table where the names are dropped in. The second question, which is a really interesting question, how do you deal with, what is good leadership? I think in my journey, one of the things that I've found is I have an open leadership style. I try and develop relationships with people at different levels because I know that it's through people that a leader can achieve anything. There's not a lot that I can do by myself, but when I have networks of people, the job that I want to happen or the work that I want to happen does happen. So I try to build relationships before I come across as a leader or as a manager. So it's really, really important for me to do that. I try to lead by example. So I go out and I demonstrate what I'm expecting people to do, set really clear expectations with people, hold people to account, because in the NHS, people will tell you that we're not very good at holding people to account, but I try to do that. But I do it in a supportive way so that people feel that I'm fair and open when I'm doing that. As a mother, so both my children were born during my career in the NHS. I got married whilst in the NHS, had my children there. One of the things that I've really done is being very clear about, I'm doing all of this because I don't want my children to face some of the racial or prejudice that I did or I've seen other people face. I have been very blessed that mine have been points that I can point a few. I haven't had that much, but because I know, and I speak to many people who come speak to me about my career journey, who tell me horror stories about some of the prejudice that they experience in their work. So I do this because I want my children to know that it is possible, but I also don't want my children to face what I face. But it's not just about my children. I don't want the next generation to face what I faced. So I stand there as I try to be an example of what it can be done. So the balance sometimes can be very difficult. So again, build a relationship and a network that will help you raise your children. I was very lucky that I had a younger sister who lived with us, who was able to drop the children when I was working long hours or when I was studying. She went on to get married and have her own children, but it's really important to have a network either with other mothers, other friends, to be able to do that. But also, when you are in the role, make sure that you have a network of supporters that you work with. I have a group of 5 Black females who are directors in different places or senior leaders at a band 9 level who I meet with on a regular basis, either virtually or in person, and talk about some of the experiences that we've gone through. That for me, because they are walking the same shoes that I'm walking, they'll understand when I say this happened and it hurt me in this way, or they'll come to me and tell me the same thing. So it's really important to have that network of support. And I think MANSAG is a really good network of support that people can go to get experience, but also to share some of their burdens. So I'd encourage that you really strengthen this network so that people can feel supported.
Absolutely brilliant. Chin, thank you so much. Like you said, we've worked together at Basildon. I knew about your travels and how you went through to eventually be at the Whittington. One of the things you've said is we want a voice. We need a voice. We need voices, not a voice, at the table. And that is what MANSAG is seeking to do. And I am pleased that we have about 70 people today participating. The more we are, the more we stand together as a community, then people will start listening to us. What Chin said is not just with that only Black person in the room. We want more people in the room. And when we have that critical mass, then when we speak, they'll listen. Then our children wouldn't have to face the same issues we are facing. So thank you, Chin. I do hope you'll be able to wait till the end. And again, can I please appeal to our audience, our participants? It's a rare opportunity to talk about leadership. It's a rare opportunity to learn from others. Yes, I'm a sticker for time. I said 20 minutes, 10 minutes. But if we're getting good advice. Some of these things, if you go for a leadership course, you'll be paying £2,000, £4,000, £5,000. So let's please bear with us with time. We wouldn't overrun for too long, but when we're getting good advice, please, let's give it. Chin said she did project management. Let's improve ourselves by doing courses. She said, scan the horizon. You know what you want to do. You need to know what jobs are out there. What are the desirable qualifications? What are the essential qualifications? And work towards that. So thank you, Chin, for that very well delivered, Johnny. Claps from Tanya Wokoma. We will be going to Professor IB or EB, Erekosima. He's a consultant in renal medicine at Salford Royal Hospital, which is in the Manchester area. And he's going to talk to us about leadership in engaging and empowering international medical graduates. Most of us here are IMGs. We graduated from our home countries. And what he's trying to tell us now is how do we engage ourselves in leadership positions. So over to you, Prof. Erekosima, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rotimi, and that was just thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to share some of my experience and then talk about the IMGs in the UK. So without wasting time, I've been really inspired by the last two speakers. They said most of the things that I want to say. This is just so I'll probably be whizzing through some of my slides. So I will share my slides now. Right, here we are now. All right, so basically they've introduced me, Erekosima. I'm a nephrologist and also teach in the University of Manchester as a teaching academic. So my outline, I'll just well know what IMGs are, but there are two aspects I want to talk before talking about the leadership is differential attainment and cultural aspects and resilience, which the last two speakers have alluded to. And then I'll just give you some experience we have here in Manchester in supporting IMGs and then some learning points. And I'll then be here for discussions and questions. So we all know what IMGs are. You didn't graduate in this country. So if you come from a foreign country and want to practice in the UK, you're deemed an international medical graduate. So this is beginning in the past. We've been the definition has been foreign medical graduates, but now it's been changed to international medical graduates. So before I talk about some of the struggles and how we can support them, I'll just give you a crunch of numbers. If you look at the GMC workforce report, very interesting read in 2022. One, there's a marked increase in international medical graduates. If you heard that and you've heard some of the rhetorics on the media about some of our, especially from ethnic from our country, how they've been coming in to do postgraduate studies. And while the recent expansion in the UK medical school places and postgraduate, you can see that this is far outstripped by the growth in registrants from overseas. So that's something that we should think about, what Chin was saying. So already they are aware that this is what is going on. So UK graduates joining the workforce rose by 2% from 2017 compared to 121% from IMGs. And then the number of IMGs has increased by 40% in the last 5 years. At the time when the number of UK graduates in the workforce increased by 10%. And then of the doctors who joined the workforce in 2021, 50% were IMGs and 37% were the UK graduates. And it is estimated that the workforce will grow by a third by 2030 compared to 2021. So you can see there's something going on here. And so we need to be on our guard, as Chin told us. So look at the country of qualification of NHS doctors. UK, 59%. India, 9%. Pakistan, 5%. Nigeria, 3%. And Egypt. You can see that of all the African countries, Nigeria tops. But I'll show you another slide which shows something slightly different. So I got this data from the recent article in the BMJ. This was just last month by a journalist, Owen Dyer. So what did this tell us here? It tells us here that the proportion of Nigerians willing to relocate abroad rose from 32% in 2019 to a higher percentage, which is 73% in 2021. And Nigerians accounted for 12% of the medical workforce visas given by the UK in 2022, while Zimbabweans accounted for 18%. So Zimbabwe has overtaken Nigerians in the last year. So the General Medical Council data shows, going back home, 7,875 Nigerian doctors are currently practicing in the UK. And so this makes us begin to think. But even at the level of the World Health Organization, it counts Nigeria among the 53 mostly African countries that are on its red list for medical brain drain. And the UK government returned Nigeria to its own red list in April this year. So that same publication says that 50 doctors a week were moving overseas from Nigeria, according to the Nigerian Medical Association data. And so the National Association of Resident Doctors, which is an arm of like trainees, we'll call them junior doctors in this country, 60% of members pool plan to do the same. So that gives us an idea that there's going to be a lot of challenges for us who are going to be supporting them because the numbers are going to increase. So look at the doctor-patient ratio in Nigeria. Apologies for those that are non-Nigerians, but I'm just using this as an example. So this is cataclysmic, which, if you look at it in Nigeria, there's a ratio of 1 doctor to 4,255. This is from the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria 2018 data. So this is an old data. So at that time, there were the number of doctors counted were 47,219. And in the fellowship program locally in Nigeria, one fellow, that's one specialist trained by either the Postgraduate Postgraduate Medical College or the West African Postgraduate Medical College, is one specialist to 250,000 people. So this doctor-patient is regrettable, although if you look at compared to the ratio of doctor in India and the United States. So it is just for us to reflect on, even as we are in the UK working, and as this international medical graduates coming. So what are their problems? Well, they've highlighted these things in the last by the last two speakers. Work recognition. And so that's one of the things that our colleagues struggle with. And then secondly, working life improvement. So there is so much difference between working in their country and working in the UK. And then thirdly, educational needs. What are my educational needs? Yeah, things are pretty specific. And there is a clear pathway. And the fact is that, are they going to negotiate the pathway or just be at the periphery? So this is a data collected through some survey by my colleague, Prof. He's an anesthetist here in Manchester. Manchester Foundation Trust. I work for the Salford Royal, but he works for the Manchester Royal Infirmary. So look at it. So this is the issues that concern IMGs most. If you look at it, the major thing here is career progression. And then if you look at the local knowledge of the trust, most of them don't even know what's going on. So if you look at the data, you can see that the key things that all of us were talking about here is career progression and the local knowledge of what's going on, the human resources, how they're struggling with human resources and how to navigate their job. So this same, if you now superimpose this data onto what is in the GMC, you see that the GMC data on the workforce says that about 50% of overseas doctors have full contract, just 50%. So 49% of those work in A&E. So this should tell us something, you know. So what is the view of these doctors? So 95% of new international doctors wanted a trusted friend, which probably never came. 65% felt isolated and lonely. And then 10% are supported by friends and family. 85% wanted the peer support to be one-to-one. And then 65% wanted the body to be face-to-face or emails. So you can see the yearnings of these international medical graduates that are coming to this country. So these are the challenges. This was a survey even took place several years ago, 2005. And you can see that difficulty in getting to rotations and higher specialist training, dissatisfaction in workplace. Most of them are on trust contract forever, which is uncertain. There's a lack of appraisal. You can see there's no portfolio, no appraisal. You study leave for CPD. 50% only can afford to do that. And this is, so what I said, is it getting better in 2023? Well, I've not seen any data to suggest that. So look at the GMC fair to report 2019. 1 to 2% of non-UK graduate doctors were referred to the GMC by employers, compared to 0.5% of UK graduate doctors. And then 1.1% of BAME doctors were referred to GMC by employers between 2012 and 2017, compared to 0.5% of white doctors. So this is the more reason why they need support, mentoring, and how to navigate the system. So that brings me to differential attainment. I mean, in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of talk about differential attainment. And this is one of the things, position papers that is locking around in health education in England, although that has now been merged into the NHS in England. So what is definition? It's only explaining variation in the attainment of groups of individuals who share protected characteristics when compared with groups who do not share the same characteristic. So that's, as Shane was speaking, that was just reverberating in my mind. So you talk about differential attainment. So what is it? You can see there's a lot of stuff there. Inequality is bigger. Privilege, you see opportunities, challenge, unfair advantage, unconscious bias. There's a lot of things that are in the pot of differential attainment. So these are all things that we should be thinking when we're dealing with these doctors. So look at the scale of the issue here. Different groups of doctors progress through training at different levels. And there's a key word that is here. This is from the GMC. Research suggests variation is not easy to address. This variation is not easy to address. It's existed for decades, due to a variety of social, economic, and cultural factors. And so we cannot rule out discrimination and bias. If you look at it, UK white graduates, ability to progress is more than 75%. But look at international medical graduates, it's 41%. So this is kind of a model. I got this from Dr. Montes Patel, which the RCP Global Vice President. It's a slide that I borrowed from her. If you peel it's almost like an onion peel. If you just peel it, so you could see policies, exam structures, you could see institutional culture and resources, meso, micro, individual factors. Macro is a wider educational and social cultural landscape. And then if you look at the micro, learning styles, culture, language, interactions, somebody will like it or not, these are very important factors, but they're not visible. So if you look at differential attainment and look at culture, so look at the cultural context so that we'll be able to marry all of them and begin to understand what how to deal with these doctors. So cultural context, I got this from Wikipedia. It said it includes beliefs, meanings, customs, ideas, and language and norms. When these doctors come from another country, so always understand that they have all these characteristics. And so it also incorporates values that are learned and attitudes that are shared among this group of people. So if that is the case, look at this thing I got. See, if you look at countries where there's a higher context culture, lower context culture, if you look at it, so in the higher context, which is with Africans, so we tend to prefer indirect verbal interaction, compared to the lower context, tend to prefer direct verbal interaction. So if you just look down, you can see that in the lower context, they value individualism, while we, the African and in the Asian communities, we're generally more proficient in, we value group membership, we value communities because of our social cultural background. And something that is very important that I saw here is communicating highly structured, detailed messages with literal meanings. That's what they do in the lower context, which is in the European countries like here. And we talk around point, avoid saying no, rely more on context and feeling, communicating sometimes simple language. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. If you look at the countries, UK is more of low context, so things are changing. If you look at the definitions that are put there, things are changing. But if you look at the countries, but if you look at most of the lower countries, look at India and all that, they are more into high context, implicit way of communicating. So this is just a summary. If you see low context and high context, I got this slide from Sujesh. It's communication. You can see the explicit, clear, linear, and verbal. Context is not important. Focus and results oriented. But if you look at it in India, Egypt, and other Asian countries, and even Nigeria, implicit, non-verbal, context is everything. Feeling and relationship oriented. So you can see that they might feel that the high context, where the low context communicators will see that they might feel that, high context colleagues are lacking transparency or unable to communicate effectively. So these are had impact even in exams, where communication skills and all that. They might feel about low context colleagues stating the obvious or sounding patronizing. So when a low context person from a low context culture background so that is what happens. So how do we deal with all this stuff? So my colleague did put some stuff here, which is answer emails, be concise, expect confrontations, deal with facts, structure your messages, which is if you're mentoring or if you're supporting an IMG, so these are some of the things that you probably want to be kind of mentoring them around. Communication, how do you deal with navigate all these things? So how to deal with I contest colleagues, avoid direct yes or no questions, be patient and be open and all that. So I put this just for a bit of a tool to just be aware that communication and cultural context is incredibly important. So you can see the way feedbacks there. So direct, which is the high context, I'm frank, blunt, honest, because I want to help you to improve. See, you're telling the IMG like that, just for example. Saying direct, I don't want to hurt you, so I am soft, subtle, and diplomatic with you, and all that. So you can see that the UK is just around in between. And that brings me to the fact that most of these IMGs even misinterpret feedback. And that is because of our cultural context. How do we express that? So that needs to be taken into consideration when we're dealing with these IMGs. So communication IMGs must be low context. Because the UK it's about low context communication, although there's a bit of high context. If you look at my last slide, so that to reduce confusion. And I just brought this slide again. This I got from my colleague. So you can see the countries, UK, Sweden, they are more emotional and expressive. avoiding confrontation. You can see the various countries. The US is more direct. They tell you things direct. And so that's also, should remind us of dealing with these people. So now, based on all this, so ways to facilitate communication across cultural boundaries, we need to be self-aware that this is what we're dealing with. We should recognize the differences. But I don't want to go by you through the various characteristics. But you see, you should share your experience very honestly, like Chin has done. So those are things that we must be doing as leaders. So that brings me to resilience, which has been demonstrated even in the last two speakers. Remember Dilly saying that you have to keep knocking. You must be resilient. You have to keep knocking. You have to keep asking. So if you look at the domains of resilience, this is I got it from the Leadership Academy. You have to mental flexibility. You look at that physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental. So those are some of the things that you will be like tools or will be like things that you need to remember as you deal with these things, as you take these challenges and responsibility. So putting all that together, resilient, cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence. So that makes you be curious about other cultures when you're dealing with doctors from other cultures, international medical graduates from other cultures, willing to modify your behavior and all that. So that brings to the crux of the matter. So who is a leader? I think a lot of things have been said about leadership here. There are quite key things. People have given different perceptions to leadership. Even within the NHS here, even within my own trust, recently they've been doing some accelerated leadership course. But the fact that is the talk, but the fact that do we put that into action? So perception, articulation, conviction, empathy, resolve. I don't need to begin to give you lectures here on that. So most of you have been in leadership positions for so long. But there are different leadership styles when it comes to Goldman. So the things that I just want to highlight that there are different ways. So which style do you feel that you adopt most frequently? Now, have you been in a situation where you recognize that you have used one of these styles to good effect? Like you see, I just put leadership styles there. These are things that most of you that have been in leadership roles will be familiar with. So are you visionary? Are you commanding, coaching, pace setting, democratic, affiliative? So these are some of the things that, like I said, you're already aware. And this is something that I just want to just point out. If you see, look at that, I just brought this slide because see low to high supportive behavior, low directive and high supportive behavior, high directive and high supportive behavior, high directive and low supportive behavior. So which category do you belong? If you take all this delegating, supporting, coaching, and directing. So these are the key responsibilities, which most of you have alluded to my last two speakers. So you have to facilitate engagement because I want to bring out the key elements here. And you have to, it's a collective thing. And also you have to facilitate engagement. And that's why the title is there. And I will say a bit more on those things as we go through as we go through this session today. So we deliver the resources available and coach and develop individuals to be their professional best and realize their full potential. Very important. So look at the leadership characteristics, decision leadership. Now I brought this, I got this slide for a guy that worked in 3 countries. So it's quite different. So in the UK, we have like kind of a egalitarian and consensual kind of leadership. And then if you go beyond, if you go to most of our countries, it's hierarchical and all that. So what am I doing? So if you look at a typical IMG in a hospital, I've seen where in my department where we just came in from India. And in the handover meetings, you can see they are not able if when they ask some question, they feel they're confrontational because the background they're coming from. It's like there's a lot of hierarchy, so you don't speak. I still remember I went to a meeting. I just came back from Nigeria, and then I was in a clinical meeting, and they just said, as officers will ask a question, and then this group will ask a question, and all. So there was already a bit of hierarchy that the as officers first. After that, you don't speak. That's what they're used to. So that's why I brought this slide. So in order to support this group of doctors, I put this together: leadership, management, education. That's how they're going to progress. So this brings me to this slide. This slide is quite important because you can look at the GMC standards of postgraduate medical education in 2016. You look at the learning and environment. There are 5 themes here: learning, environment, and culture. So enhance induction. What needs to be done to ensure an inclusive, supportive educational environment? That's one thing that we should ask ourselves. And if you come down to educational governance and leadership, so what qualities are most valuable in educational and clinical supervisors? How many people are involved in that, and how do they do it? And then you look at supporting learners, pastoral support, mentoring, peer networks, counseling, and all that. And then it comes to supporting educators like you and me in terms of training in unconscious bias and cultural competence, which I just mentioned before in the various cultural contexts. So IMG should be afforded fair trade pattern. If you look at the risk and vulnerability, you see poor relationship with seniors. Trainers have time to get to know trainees. So that is one thing that we must push for. Trainers have faith in their abilities, perception of unconscious bias, because somebody comes from abroad, you think that, they don't know much. But the ones that I put in red that I want to emphasize is negative stereotype, likely to fail. So before you will start, they think you're going to fail. So you got to establish that good relationship, that's a protective process, a relationship between trainees and from different cultural groups, role models, aspirational, advisors, career support. And then most of them come in, they learn lack of family, friends support, so support of family and friends outside of work. I'll show you, we have a peer body network here in Manchester. So the question I want to ask is, have you supervised an IMG doctor before, especially one new to the UK? That is somebody you just met in maybe a few months, or is the usual allocation to you. So what has worked well? So have you experienced any particular challenges? So that is, I just brought this question so that we'll be reflecting on it as I go through this talk. So look, this is what I just put here. A facilitator in the middle, you got a motivator, engaging, appraiser, teacher, mediator. So the fact is that sometimes we tend to confuse a few things. So we need to be very clear in our objective in trying to deal with the IMG in order to help them. So how do we do that? And that's where your skills come as a leader. So look at one of you see, most of this is about supporting, colleagues in the clinical environment. It's all published by the GMC. This was published in 2015. And it says that valuing doctors from cross-cultural setting in training. It's a departmental cohesion and leadership. These are some of the things that came out from that paper, that manual. So that we understand how to deal with these doctors, and most importantly, effective senior leadership. And the fact is that one of the things that we must be asking ourselves in this day and age, they've been talking about unconscious bias training. So, and that is something that people are beginning to talk about in the last couple of years. So this Johari window, you talk about known by others or known by, there are certain things that you do unconsciously. And that is one of the things that even perhaps happened to Shane when she went for a job that she was very qualified. And maybe that's what has happened to her. So how do we empower them then? So we need to begin to think, help doctors communicate more effectively. Look at the cultural context slides that I put there. Ensure understanding of the GMC rules and regulations. Help them with understanding of clinical governance, revalidation, audit, quality improvement, and patient safety concepts. And then raise awareness of differential attainment and intervention to close the gap. So you must be proactively doing that, not just reactive. So learn about the cultural differences and the importance of personal resilience. and ensure understanding of the NHS employment rules and regulation, and then be aware of support networks where you can signpost these doctors to. So look at the Jaiyesimi Welcome to UK Practice, which started a couple of years ago, and you can see that the GMC is becoming aware. If you look at, I advise everybody to look at the GMC 2022 workforce report. It has a lot of very important information there that concerns international medical graduates, recognizing some of these issues that I've just talked about. So what we do here in Manchester, we have set up peer support groups. We have established mentoring schemes and tools of engagement. And so we've set up a peer body. So a peer body support system involves pairing of experienced IMG, LED doctors with a new IMG in the organization. In your organization, probably a hospital, a trust. Bodies help these bodies help the new colleague to learn the basics, understand workplace culture, facilitate social networks, and it's so good for emotional and psychological well-being. So what are the benefits? We've seen that we're currently collecting some data, waiting Professor MANSAG to share his data with us, making new friends that new doctors will otherwise be unlikely to make, socializing and all that, good for psychological well-being. I've mentioned that before. The mentoring surveys show that 85% not trained in supporting. So most people don't even know how to mentor, coaching, and all that. So there are a lot of courses now to equip ourselves to be able to do this job. So this understanding of types of support, building rapport, and effective listening. So you need training to do this to deliver this. So these are some of the tools of engagement I've used, and here in the Northwest we have WhatsApp groups. We survey these doctors with some of the survey results I've shown at the beginning of my talk. And so we have doodles to be able to know when everybody's free so that we can come together and all that. So those are some of the tools of engagement we use. So what is success then in the effective work in training of IMG? So look at the barrier, new ethical, legal, and professional environment. This is where I don't know some of these things before. So through induction and self-awareness, that is done. Peer body, networking and resilience training. So new social and support environment, engagement with peers, cross-cultural working environment, good leadership, like me and you, previous learning and relearning. I'm not aware of opportunities, curriculum reflection. I was very glad when Chin mentioned about explore the opportunities. And she even mentioned that even though you tick only 60 to 70% of the boxes, you encourage them to apply. That's an experience. So what are the tips? As I'm just wrapping up. Recognizing diversity, very important. We deal with several, like from the data I've shown, a lot of doctors coming to the UK from abroad. Early identification, intervention, and support, mentoring and role modeling, and then taking a more holistic approach to training performance. Not just what she perceived the person to be. Well-being, mental health, finance, practical advice. So you can see that people are beginning to be awake. Last July 2022, they launched this national IMG document. It's a guidance document, it's there, e-learning module, supplementary resources. If you go to the NHS employers websites, there's a lot of information there, welcoming and valuing the international medical graduates. And then you see that a lot of people are doing that. And in the Northwest here, we have a supporting international medical graduate seminar that is coming up in October. And so we have master class every year, which equip leaders. So just the final slide, so for individual reflection. So what have you gained from today as we talk, maybe at the end? What are you going to do as a consequence? And so remember, you can shape the future of this IMG. And so we just look at the future, we just look at the past. These people come to this country, they want to better themselves and improve their skills. So that's something that I hope that individually, all of us will reflect on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Prof, for that, Professor Erekosima. quite honestly, I've learned a lot. So many things you've drawn our attention to that even at my level, I'm hearing for the very first time. So it's been very educative, challenging, signposting. So thank you for that. You made reference to having a trusted friend, 95%, which Chin said, get allies. There's nothing wrong with getting white allies. Loneliness is a problem. We as a community tend to not want to share our problems with others, but it is important that we do, because the earlier you nip things in the bud, the better the outcome. The earlier you seek advice, the better the outcome. So just to encourage people, and you mentioned communication, getting a coach, getting a mentor. I believe the president of MANSAG will talk to us at the end about the MANSAG mentoring program. There are a number of questions in the chat room. One that says, what is impositor syndrome? That's one question for you, or anybody can answer it, but that's one question. Yeah.
Yes.
Can any member of the panel please tell us?
This is the first time I'm hearing impositor syndrome. I've not heard it. Yes, so if somebody can ally that, that would be useful. Maybe it's a learning process for me too.
Is there anybody who wants to take that on?
That's imposter syndrome, where you're feeling like you don't deserve to be there. So just wondering if our leaders have experienced this or seen others experience it.
Lovely.
I think several times, if I can just say, there are times when you doubt yourself, you doubt your abilities because somebody has said something. I think it's stronger within women than it is within men. I think you think you don't deserve to be there. You feel like a fraud, like you shouldn't be there. So there are times when it's very important for you to have a network. Again, that's why it's important to have a network where people are giving you assurance that you deserve to be at the table. So yeah, sometimes it does happen, but it's really important to try and get over it very quickly, because it can paralyze people. I've heard of people who've been paralyzed and aren't able to achieve something, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, as somebody had said in the notes, where you can't do what you are capable of doing because you're feeling like you shouldn't be there. So I really encourage people to have friends who will be their cheerleaders. For me, Professor Rotimi is one of my cheerleaders. He's always there encouraging and talking to me from a different specialty, from a different role. But he's one of those people that always assure me that I deserve to be where I am. So it's really important to get people like that.
Yeah, can I just say something? Let me just explain. I mean, recently, we're in a focus group in the trust. So they are talking about most senior doctors retiring. And one of my colleagues there in ONG did bring to my attention a lady who I think came from one of the Asian countries, and the expression, this is exactly the imposter syndrome. She can't even express what she wants, and she's been doing. Can you imagine this doctor? She's close to 55. She's still on the OSHO rota. So I told them there's a problem here. So I had to email the workforce associate director. But why is this happening? A 55-year-old who will retire in a few years' time, she's still on the SHO rota. So about when I spoke to the consultant I was she's working with, she was telling me some of the problems. I said, you have not done your job over the last few years. She doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to be pushed. She doesn't want to do anything. She was told she would take some skills in colposcopy, and she backed out with, So those are some of the things, we need to consider.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and thank you for the very insightful lecture you gave into us. Very, very helpful. And talking about imposter syndrome, I believe our next speaker, perhaps I don't know what he's going to tell us. Perhaps he might even tell us something about that in his speech. Mr. Christopher Okuonghae is an advanced practitioner reporting and cardiac imaging radiographer at the Newcross Hospital in Wolverhampton. He's a member of the executive of MANSAG. He's not a doctor, and MANSAG, we usually say, is not a doctor's organization. It's an organization for healthcare professionals. We won't go too much into that. We've spoken about getting allies, coming together, don't work in silos, have a critical voice. Let's work together. But let us welcome Chris, who will be sharing self-belief and breaking down barriers in the workplace, his own experience. As I said, he's the advanced practitioner reporting and cardiac imaging radiographer. So he is a senior person. And Mary Okuonghae has said the best way to overcome imposter syndrome is to have self-belief, seek personal and professional development, and find a mentor or sponsor. So Chris, I believe you're going to do a good job to that. And thank you for accepting to come on to this panel. Thank you. Over to you.
You're mute.
Yeah, sorry. Are you hearing me now? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much again, MANSAG, for organizing this program. And particularly thank you, Professor Jaiyesimi. I've told you before, just looking at you alone without speaking, I get inspired. That's one of the things I hope to bring here without particularly saying too much. I wanted my talk to be slightly different from what others have given, because already I've got Professor Dilly Anumba talking about knocking on many doors and being hardworking and believing in yourself, and he doesn't want anyone to blame any failure on your race or color. And then we have Chin also spoke about working with the right people, taking an opportunity when it's available, and of course involving presentations. And then we have Prof. Erekosima talking about differential attainment. But in my own view, please let me share my screen for you. And I hope you can all see this. If you don't get anything out of what I have planned to say today, please note these three different words: self-belief, preparedness, and of course, persistence. These are very vital because the road that's in front of everyone, it's quite hard and tough sometimes. And you will need things inside you to actually be bigger or big enough to accomplish what you have set for yourself. And that's what is bringing my topic today, which is self-belief and breaking barriers in the workplace. And of course, my name is Prince Okuonghae, as everyone has already been told. And then in self-belief, you have dreams and imaginations, primary goals. You want to be a doctor, you want to be a radiographer, you want to grow your business, you want to be a consultant, you want to be president, for example, But if you don't have the self-belief, we're just wasting time. And then someone, a very notable British philosopher, has already told us before that surely there must be something that resides in our heart that is not perishable. Now, what is that thing that's in you that you would like to hold on to? Because life sometimes can be more than a dream. And still on the topic of self-belief, it is one of the most important forces known to man. If you don't believe enough, you may just wither, you may just shave your ambitions, either halfway or even before you even start. Because it's only when you give supreme performance that you can get supreme, if you have supreme belief, then you get supreme performance. But that's only when you have already perfected, your
thank you.
Your actions or professional engagement. And so, how do you come about all this? Talking about persistence here. Anytime you hope, sorry, I just need to move something away from my screen. Anytime you try to achieve anything beyond average, you will require the trait of persistence, determination, because determination alone and persistence are the things that are most necessary. Whether you're creating a building, or building something. As we were once told by one of the American presidents, Calvin Coolidge, there's nothing in the world that can take the place of persistence. Not even the mighty talent. Because the world is already full of people with unsuccessful talents. So is that persistence in your workplace, persistence in what you're doing, and trying to rediscover yourself that will bring you to where you want to be. I'm going to stop there a little bit and just give a small thing about self-belief in my own encounter. You see, people talk of racism, tribalism, and all the other isms. But I do tell you that in life generally, you get prepared for one thing or the other. For me in particular, evil is evil. It doesn't matter whether it's in Russia, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Nigeria. Evil is evil. If it's not right, it's just not right. I got prepared in Nigeria already, with things like ethnicity or tribalism and all that. These are things that was common in Nigeria anyway. So all these things that are probably the things that are not right are actually from the same pot, from wherever they came from. They are just siblings. So when I go to South Africa and people began to talk about xenophobia, all the other stuff and all that, you see, I was already prepared from where I came from. And so when I was doing things, I just did things knowing fully well that what is in me is going to be bigger. I need the things that will be in me to be able to overcome what I'm going to face. So I didn't really take it, too seriously, or neither did I allow it to actually overcome me emotionally or even physically, not to be able to achieve what I did. So most of the things I did there, people will look at me and later on they come to me and say, look, how did you do all this? I used to motivate a lot of South Africans who gather around me. They used to ask me, you mean you just left Nigeria, you have no parents, you have nobody here, and that kind of stuff? And I used to tell them that, well, the world has been made already. It's just up to you. You just have to choose where you want to be. And if you stick by it and you believe in it, you would be able to achieve it. So I did a lot of motivational speaking in South Africa, aside my normal job, of course, which is radiography, because I was made to go and work in a very rural area. Sometimes I have to be a district radiographer, not for one hospital, but several hospitals. So, but I found most of the time I have to do just motivation, tell those kids, those younger ones, how to actualize their dreams. But in all of them, one thing I preached most was preparedness. Because the more prepared you are for effective and wanting quality results, the only way to do it is have what they call sublime confidence, which can produce some amount of time that you use to put in your preparation. Because wise people usually say, if you got 6 hours to cut down a tree, please try and use most of the hours, 4 hours in particular, sharpening the axe or your cutlass. But for those who are Christians, who you believe that no matter what you do, because I think Imran on this forum did ask whether if you work hard, is that enough for you to get your advancement or promotions or whatever? The answer is sometimes no. You may work, you may be the best, the most hardworking person in the department, in your hospital, but you just don't get, the kind of accolades other people get. That's why Christians themselves believe that all promotions come from God. And now I will try and expatiate without going too religious. Not that I'm too religious myself. But if you are good in what you do, nobody can hide it. Nobody can hide it. You just shine through the dark. It's just like light shining through a dark tunnel. Everybody will see you, but they may not recognize this, so often. But one day, according to Nigerians, be one day, you will shine through. So you do not know the day you will be ushered into greatness or breakthrough. Again, I refer you to Winston Churchill, who was former prime minister in this country, Britain. Once said, there will come a day when they figuratively tap on your shoulders to do something you are inherently born to do, your talent. But he did say that, what a tragedy if you are not prepared. So preparedness, preparing yourself for the rainy day, preparing yourself for the glorious day is actually what everyone should be doing, if you are aspiring to become better than who you are in any field. And then, because your finest hour do not come with an announcement. So you got to be prepared. If you are preparing for victory, you have to have all the ingredients I've told you before. You have to have the self-belief, you got to be prepared, and you need to be persistent in asking, which is equivalent to what Professor Anumba had said before. You knock on different doors, because Bob Marley also told us, when one door is closed, then another will be opened. So if you don't believe that, and you see one door is closed, and then you start to grumble, well, that's the end. You may end up sitting down there, and then in this country, they say, when you're too old and you're always talking and grumping, they say you are a grumpy old man. Before you get to that level, you need to change your psychic, and try to approach things, in a very positive manner. Because excellence is the best deterrent to all the isms that we're talking about. With racism, tribalism, nepotism, sectionalism, and even, according to my friend, parapoism. You got to be prepared. And it's only when you are good in what you do that you can outshine all this. And I will refer you back again to what our very rich industrious guy, Richard Branson, would say. Business opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. So you don't just say, I've knocked on this door, it didn't open, and then you start to grumble, and you start to grumble, and then you start to grumble. But hang on, another bus is just coming, so you need to take the advantage. And Chin has already told you, take opportunities when they come. Sometimes they may not seem relevant, but you are just within the, if you are not in it, you know, I mean, to be in, to win it, you need to be in it. So you don't just knock on one door, it doesn't open, and then you're off, and you start grumbling, telling everybody how the world is, how the world is wicked, and all that. Look, the world is made for everyone. It just depends on whether you want to take the extra mile in taking, you know, the opportunity that avails to you. For me in particular, you know, I came to, what I'm just good at doing is when I get to any department, you know, or any hospital, right from General Hospital, Lagos, all the way to South Africa, Johannesburg, Nelspruit. What I was good at doing is when I say things that are not right, I just stick my head in and I say, how do we change it? Eventually, I may not be the official, I mean, the main benefactor of that program, which has always been anyway, you know, but people always go through that program immediately I've gone or set things up. They always go through that program and then excel for that. So many cases I have here in Warsaw or Wolverhampton Hospital. You know, we have departments that where no blacks were working before when we came, and these guys were really not, because you are what you know. They didn't know. It was very strange for them to work with people like us in the clinical setup. You know, so when you start bringing ideas, they shy away. As a matter of fact, they even think that you come with empty brain. I'm sorry to say, this was years ago, and I think it's still happening. You know, when you I remember a porter once asked me, when I asked him to go and fetch a patient for an x-ray, and there he did ask me, was really very embarrassed that I'm asking him to go and fetch a patient. That was those days. I don't think it does happen much nowadays. You know, he did say, look, where did I do my radiography? And I told him in Nigeria. He said, okay. Which means if he was in Nigeria, he would have been a doctor. And I said, okay, but just bring the patient first, and then we'll talk about that later. You know, because there was a general belief that when you come in from whatever country you have come from, you have a maybe substandard brain or something like that. You couldn't achieve anything, as they were told before. But you see, it's because we now begin to mingle with them that they now know our brain. They see professors out of us. They have seen so many leadership, you know, qualities out of us. So everybody's now queuing up. They all now know what we do. You know, this whole department, we have all revolutionized. If you go to our departments, we've got Nigerians in different areas doing great things, you know, so they are no more surprised, you know. So it's all down to, you know, taking the opportunities that we have got to be able to shine through so that people can actually begin to understand us more, you know. And then, because I was not going to take too long, so the summary of what I'm trying to talk about is that you have to believe in giving 110%, wherever you are or whatever you do. And you thrive because of knowledge, the things that's in your brain, you know, and not grumbling so much. Because efficiencies will come from proactive transforming how we do things. If you are a gold and you go and hide yourself under the rubbles, nobody's going to discover you. But you have to make an effort to actually come out and tell people. When I was told I couldn't study some certain things those days without naming, mentioning names, I was told I couldn't do so and so thing because you are that. And I remember my answer years ago was like, look, listen, let me do the course, please, but you do the worrying. You know, I will do the course, but you continue with the worry. And eventually, when I finished, you know, people wrote me cards or congratulatory messages and all that. And today we have so many people. The manager really called me those days and said, look, Chris, you don't know what you just done. For 3 years, you have been asking people to, you've been looking for people to do this, to study that particular course, because we needed it more. It's now I'm talking about reporting for radiographers, you know. But today we have more than 15 reporting radiographers. going through after I've opened the door. And that's similar stories with most Nigerians you see on in every office as of today. So with the last few words, if you can't run, assuming you are in a place so difficult and you can't do anything, please walk. And if you cannot walk, because there are so many impediments, so many obstacles on your way, try and be crawling, you know. But it's just that in any place you find yourself, whatever you do, you have to keep moving. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Chris, for that wonderful presentation. Persistence, again, self-belief. These are things that you've brought to the fore, again, reinforcing and buttressing what other speakers have said. And then one of the things you said is excellence is the best deterrent to all the isms, racism, discrimination, parapoising. I would also add to that professionalism in everything you do is also a deterrent. It's similar to what you've said, excellence. So as professionals, we should be professional in what we do. And if there are questions, Chris, we'll take it shortly. Afterwards, I'm looking through the chat line, but I'm sure there'll be questions for you. So please stay ahead, or I will have questions for you. And I think you've alluded to it, because people, more so we doctors at times, think that other people who are not doctors, we don't give them the respect that we should give human beings. How have you been able to cope with at times when people look at you and say, because you're a radiographer, you shouldn't be perhaps even talking to them? That's just one question for me. And Ijabla will also have a question for you. So we'll take two questions before going to Dr. Oge Iluzwe. So how do you deal with it when perhaps not just Black doctors, maybe white doctors, or people who are in perhaps a profession who they think is better than what you're doing? How do you handle that?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's probably not a tough question, because it's already is ready-made question, because if you are from a minority in Nigeria, they call it minority group in Nigeria, you would have already learned a lot of things anyway, you know. So when I traveled out, I just took the knowledge and the experience from with me anywhere I go, and that's how I crack barriers. So I've always told my colleagues, right from when I was student union president or leader of one group or the other, a lot of things has got to do with quality you've got inside you. You know, you see, I can stand with, I've been standing with you a lot of times, and me and you would talk. You know, if nobody sees your certificate behind your back, nobody will know who is who. And sometimes probably people might even make a mistake. I'm a prof, you know, not knowing that the one standing near me is the prof. It's what you exude, is ability. So I don't like something like atmosphere or intimidation, intimidate me to not to want to bring out what I know or what I know. But in all, I always associate people who are progressive. And I remember Chin said something like that. You associate with the right people, you know. People who still have problem with this one is not this one is not that. I think they are the ones that need to grow up. You see, it's not if you are in this day and age, if you are still thinking about, okay, somebody is A, the other one is D, and then you can't, you know. So I don't allow inferiority complex, we call it in Nigeria, you know, to push me down, you know. But if I've got something to share, I want to share it at the top level. And if you're a doctor, if you're a pharmacist, if it's something that's peculiar to your own office, I know you'll be better than me. But if you bring things generally that we want to discuss, I'm sure I can discuss at the same level as you are. So with the white doctors in particular, I just, they didn't know initially why every time looks like I'm always happy and relaxed, because I am the one that would be advising them that, look, listen, life is more than what you think. When you do things, we're all here in a world, we're all just passing through. It's not like maybe everybody, one person owns the other one. The fact that you didn't know that I'm capable of something, that's not my own fault, it's your own fault. So now that you know, are you better than me? The answer is always no. Initially, people, even in the department, you just come as a Nigerian or from whichever India, wherever you come from, you find students not even coming to you, even though you are the senior in charge. So one of the reasons is that they are just not used to your kind of person. Sometimes the way you talk, they're not used to that kind of voice. It's not the way you pronounce mango that they pronounce mango. So they are just not comfortable. But as time goes on, I've seen people go to students go to meet junior ones, and they say, look, why don't you go and meet Chris? He's the one in charge. And then they sluggishly come because the senior one is coming to meet me anyway. So I have confidence in me. Like I said at the beginning of my slide, is what's in you has to be bigger or enough to attain what you're going to be doing or what you hope to achieve. So I don't allow inferiority complex to weigh me down. That has been the key.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. There was a hand up, but I think we'll take it at the end, Ijabla. It's the last speaker. She's not speaking because she hasn't got anything to say. She's not the last speaker because it's not a topic that's not relevant or high up there. But she's a well-respected person who I have known for many years. And I'm amazed as to her journey. And she's going to share it with us. Dr. Oge Ilozwe, she's a GP partner and trainer, Leadership Academy, a GP partner and a trainer. And today she's presenting at the MANSAG Leadership Academy. And what she wants to tell us is her leadership journey so far. So, Oge, thank you for coming on board. And so over to you. And please, to our participants, please bear with us. We'll soon, I believe, hopefully by 1 o'clock, we will be rounding up. But please bear with us. And please, if you have questions, put in the chat room and I'll address them. Okay, please, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. So they talked about imposter syndrome. That was definitely me when asked to speak at this academy with so many eminent speakers. But one thing that I think we need to do better as MANSAG, we all have value to add. We all have story to tell, and we need to be better at sharing our stories. And there is people that will be encouraged and inspired by it. So myself, just a quick synopsis, born in the UK to Nigerian Igbo parents. I spent the first few years of primary school in Enugu. So for people that say there's nothing Nigerian about me in terms of my Igbo-ness via North London, I am from Nigeria originally. Came back to the UK, did the rest of my school here. And my first failure, if you like, and this is an encouragement for those, especially with kids, the whole 11+ journey is a battle. So my first, if you like, failure was not getting into the local grammar school of my mother's choice. I think I told them at the interview that I really didn't want to be here. My mother was making me do all these exams and stuff. So I ended up in the local comprehensive where I did thrive. And I switched to another school for sixth form and A-levels. Now for A-levels, the plan was to follow my mother's footsteps and do medicine, but then ended up having a retake year, not quite making the mark. And it's interesting because the things you're told at that point of you have to get all A's. I remember getting to medical school eventually and finding out that people got in with the results I got for my A levels. So there's a lot about sometimes the coaching you get as a student, what we tell our young people, and how we navigate that interview space. So my first degree, which was the best decision I made in hindsight, looking back, as much as it was very difficult at the time, I did my first degree, physiology, BSc at King's College London, with a year abroad at the University College Los Angeles. Graduated with a first-class honours. The plan was always medicine, so went straight onto that at Imperial College and finished that at 2006. Had my foundation years and had a tussle. I definitely was going down the medicine route, did my MRCP, but then realized GP suited my personality. And again, with that whole inferiority complex, GP is seen as the specialty sometimes you do when you can't do anything else. But I firmly believe we need our brightest and our best in general practice, seeing the most of the community and providing universal access to healthcare for our whole population. So I did GP training and I took a year out working in rural South Africa. My first aim was to go and do NYSC in Nigeria, but I realized I didn't have anything in my hands yet. I wanted to be in an environment where I was training and building on skills. And South Africa option came up and I took it and had a wonderful year out there. I completed my training in 2012. So straight into the fire with my GP work. I was salaried in one practice, partner in another. I was a succession plan. And disclaimer, one of the practices was my mother's practice. She's a GP in North London. So I joined her as a partner, and then I became a salaried in another practice. Eventually, the two partners, they were single-handed, retired, and I merged the two practices in 2015. And so had to start the journey of building a new team, a new culture, recruitment and retention, with all the external pressures we know in the NHS and in primary care. My other roles and other work, so as I've said, I've been a GP partner from 2012. I joined our local medical committee, which is affiliated with the BMA in 2014, and became the chair of the Barnet Local Medical Committee in 2021. Became a GP trainer in 2016. That was one of my aims when we first merged practices. I've been welfare secretary of MANSAG on the exec committee since 2018, I believe. I was appointed as a clinical advisor to the COVID-19 vaccination program, London region in 2021. That was kind of looking for other roles to build on my skills and my work. And last year, I was appointed as a trustee of an inclusive arts charity, local, which I met through my vaccine work. And they asked me to come on board as a trustee, which I proudly did last year. So some of my peaks, talked about the peaks and the valleys of my leadership journey so far. I'm really proud that I've built a supportive and an award-winning team in my practice. We have a healthy culture of support and empowerment. We spend too many hours at work for it not to be a culture where I enjoy being around my colleagues, and we're building an environment where everyone can thrive in the way they need to be and the way they want to be. This statement was really proud for me. It was a member of staff that joined. It was less than a year she'd been there. And she wrote this for an induction pack. And she talked about our practice providing an environment where everyone respects and likes one another, where everyone is treated as equal. We're a relaxed bunch, good sense of humor. It is stressful. Our work is hard. There's no way. The pressure is on. There's no way to get away from that. But we keep each other going with collaborative working, helping each other out. And there's a good positive team spirit, so I was just really happy that someone that had not been with us for even a year wrote that. And these are the awards we won at a local award ceremony last year. Mission statements, sometimes they're there for CQC or other purposes, but it was really important for me to get all the team members contributing to this and trying to imbibe that in their day-to-day practice. Some of the valleys, there's a personal cost. My mother has always told me on easy lies the head. I always say on easy lies the head. The rest of the statement is that wears the crown. I had to figure out being a manager versus a leader. And I realized I'm a clinical leader. I'm not actually a manager. And it's really important in primary care that we're training up capable, available managers to do the work that's required as the remit gets wider and wider. That capable workforce across the clinical and non-clinical staff can be hard, especially in this current climate where morale can be quite low in the NHS. And for me personally, how to let it go. This practice has been my baby in many ways. but I need to make room for the next stage of my journey, my leadership journey, and the rest of life as well. So that is a challenge that I'm facing currently. So these are my key leadership lessons. I didn't want to keep you too long this morning. First one is figure out who you are. What are your own core values? And when you know that, you can contribute to the culture of your organization accordingly, even if it's in your team or wider. To me, a great leader propels everyone forward with kindness. This is really important. And it's a statement I learned from a recent senior leadership course I've been on. Really important to really enable everyone with kindness. It's my job to inspire, set a vision, set direction, but you need to bring everyone along with you with kindness and empathy. Third lesson I wanted to share is learn to navigate the system you're in. As was mentioned before, we are in the UK, we are in a Western world. We need to understand it and navigate it accordingly. But we have real value to bring as bringing diversity around the table. And people are looking for that. So there are ways to bring our authentic selves around this table. And the next thing to think about is identifying your team. Who are your people? Who are your key people? How do you sustain each other? And for me, this is an important lesson both in work and out of work, because you need that support network around you out of work as well. My last slide is this. This is my inspiration. Some of you here know her. My mother, Dr. Stella Okuonghae, who brought me to MANSAG as a student. And she is my mentor and inspiration. And she celebrates 50 years qualified as a doctor this summer. So I've been so blessed to have someone like that to look up to. But I believe we can form a network in MANSAG where we have people that we can look to like this. And I always say I follow in the footsteps of greatness and want to continue, as we continue to build networks and get to know each other a little bit more, let us pull each other up and continue on our journeys of excellence as we're known for as Nigerians. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was sweet. Taking us from infancy to where you are today. It exposes what is possible, what is achievable, merging two practices into one and changing the culture.
Yeah.
And then getting that feedback from one of your team members. So thank you very much, Oge. And when I said, please would you speak? You said, I think it was you or maybe Chris, that I don't qualify to speak. You do. You've done a good job to this. You're a trustee. So I should encourage people to look for non-executive director jobs. Be a governor in your school or your children's school. And Oge alluded to team spirit, building a conducive environment. And Chris, I think it was Chris, somebody mentioned emotional expressiveness. We as Africans tend to speak in the way we speak, and some people think we're being aggressive. I think in part of the EDI, equality, diversity training, and cultural training, we've got to let people know that we don't mean harm when we speak the way we do. But again, we as a people should be able to modify the way we speak. When in Rome, behave like the Romans. So the shouting, high-pitched voices. The late Queen of England, I understand, as well as Margaret Thatcher, had to go for voice training because they had a very high-pitched voice and it wasn't really pleasant to the ears. So let's improve ourselves when it comes to things like that. And Oge, you said, propel everyone forward. Everyone. Now, we as a community, I'm sorry when I say these things, being generalized, it's not about everybody. We have to build each other. If you build yourself alone, you're going to be there alone and it's going to be lonely and people are going to deal with you. But when you build others forward and bring them along, then you are creating a force. And you said with kindness. So let's be kind to one another. So I would want, if people have questions, please use the electronic hand. If I don't see it, my co-host will see your hand and probably call you in. But I think one of the questions that have been asked earlier on was, how do you get to know what people are saying about you without you requesting a subject access request? And then the other person, the other follow-up was, how can you change false narrative about you? So how do you know what people are saying behind you when you're not in the room? Then if it's false, how can you address that? How can you change such false narrative? Any member of the panel can pick the questions up if they want to. We're now into question and answer time. So please, and I will also go through the chat as well, and my co-host will also do the same if we haven't addressed any question. But if you do have any, please raise your hands. I have 3 screens. I haven't seen any hands up yet. There is one. Ijabla, yes, please come in. Okay, thank you so much. That was excellent. Well done for all you do. Before I was going to introduce you, primary healthcare is the foundation of the health system. And you alluded to the fact that people think of GPs is because they couldn't get into some specialty. No, GPs are, without GPs, the health system will collapse. That's what I'll say. So well done for what you do. So Ijabla, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Prof, and thank you, Oge, Chris, and Professor Anumba, and all the other presenters today. Just 2 observations, actually a question to Chris, which has not really been answered. It's a very important conversation that you started about self-belief and preparedness. But my question is, how does one develop, self-belief? Is it something that is innate, or, are there ways that one can develop that? And then the second question, I don't know if it's a question, it's an observation, maybe I should say, and I'll welcome their comments. So there's always an age-old debate about how do you change a system? Do you do it from within, or do you do it from without? And from an African point of view, because we're Africans, we're Nigerians, so we always have to ask how these conversations are relevant, to us, and how we can, better ourselves and better our system and make life better for people who are coming. So there's a conversation about white allyship and to get into those spaces where decisions are made. People say sometimes, well, you have to behave, you have to act like them, you've got to adapt your in some way maybe contort yourself so that you will become acceptable. And one of the questions that is always at the back of my mind is, well, if you have to change who you are, change your accent, change what your core beliefs are, or pretend that those things are not so important just so you can get into those white spaces, what makes you think that when finally you have the power, you can actually be yourself and then in a way reveal yourself? Because at that point, then they're going to be thinking, well, sorry, but nobody does that and gets here. So then you become undermined and sabotaged. I don't know if you understand where I'm coming from. So I would welcome comments from people who have been on that journey or been to those spaces and what their experiences are. Thank you.
Any member of the panel? I know I could see Chin nodding her head, so Chin, over to you.
Yeah, I can make some comments, particularly I think on the one where you are expected to change your accent, change the way you behave because you want to fit in. That is one thing that I've absolutely worked against. So very proudly Black and African in everything that I do. And people have almost navigated towards me because of my difference, if that makes sense. So yes, I have faced all sorts of, whether it's racism or prejudice, but the fact that I am authentically who I am has navigated one of the leaving speeches that I had when I left my last role to take up the role of Chief Operating Officer. The comments that a lot of people were saying was that I showed them what it is to be Black. These are white people saying this, what it is to be Black and proud. The important thing is for you to have the result. I think it's really important that we think about that. So what is the result that you're giving? So for those of us in leadership posts, what are we doing? We just saw that Ogi was talking about how her practice has had all the awards. The result of those awards, the service that she's providing, we heard Chris talking about the role that he does. We heard the professors talking about what they have done, is what has made them the difference. So don't give up on who you are. Don't change who you are because you want to fit in. People will navigate towards it because of the difference that you bring. And more people are getting to that point. Their exact meetings, I wear my African attire to my board meetings sometimes, just to remind them of who I am. Because I think it's important for people to take me for the way that I am. So please don't lose your identity because you want to fit in, because you will give up at some point. So be authentically yourself.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, you used that word. I have written down here, be authentic. So that's very good. When you look at the Scottish, the Irish, when they speak using their accent. I think for as long as people can hear what you say, whatever the accent is, then that's good. Let me just give you a small snippet of what happened to me. You know, in Nigeria, W-O-R-K and W-A-L-K, we pronounce it the same way. It's just in the context of what you're saying that you understand what you're saying. Work, is it walk? Is it work? Is it? And the way I was brought up, work is work and work is work. So when patients come to see me and I say, oh, what work do you do? And they keep looking at me, it's like, what's it saying? But now I say, what job do you do? So that's how I've overcome work and all that kind of stuff. Prof, Erekosima, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, thank you, Rotimi. Yes. Now, I just want to make this point that, I mean, I have similar experiences. Most of the meetings I've attended, even in my renal job, I've been the only Black, especially in the Northwest here. And also, I'm in medical education now, the same thing. Now, you just have to be who you are. Like Rotimi said, I have the same problem with pronouncing these two words. And I said, what job do you do? And I just changed that. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that you have to be what you are. Now, everybody has been talking about, there are key words that we should take up with: perseverance, excellence, and be good at what you do. Those are the key things. And once you demonstrate that, you will get to where you are. But there is that support network that we need. I think we as MANSAG need to step up to do that. I'm sorry to say that, but we need to step up and we need to support each other. And that's why it is there, the support network and all that. So I think that's my take on this. Thanks.
Right. Before I call on Dilly, and I know the MANSAG president is going to speak. I think one of the things we have to do as individuals, MANSAG has been in existence for many years. We have to invite a friend, bring a friend, let them come and taste what this is about. I'm pleased to see Inkem on here. One of a very young, she's no longer a young doctor, but I remember her journey. So Dilly, over to you. You've got something to say.
Yes, thank you very much, Rotimi. I just wanted to make a little comment about Ijabla's really important question around self-confidence and does everybody have self-confidence? Or Can you have too much of it? Can you have too little of it? And the answer is that everybody's different. And so addressing the issue of individual personal confidence, it really is about knowing yourself, knowing where you situate in that sort of confidence platform. There are people who know that they have just the right dose of self-confidence. That's really where you want to be. Undue self-confidence is never good. And some people do have too much of it, and that becomes a bit of an irritant. It doesn't have to be just Black people or white people or green people. If you're too self-confident, it affects how you relate to others. You come across as being too knowledgeable for everybody else, and you irritate people. So, and you might be that personality type. What you then need to do is to reflect on your own personality and decide, hang on, there are times for me to be quiet and listen to others. There are times for me to recognize that someone has that skill that I don't actually have, and that my self-confidence sometimes gets the better of me. It might be that you're too enthusiastic, yes? So the first thing I say is know who you are. The best is obviously to have the right dose of confidence so that no one can knock it, but not to have so much that you don't listen to anybody else or and take directions from people. Now, the one that they try to make us have is the low self-esteem, low self-confidence, where you just don't feel you're up to it. And that's hard to deal with. People deal with it spiritually by their own belief systems and how they believe that whoever is their maker made them better than everybody else is saying they are. And some of us feel that way. I personally, sometimes I recourse to the being that made me as a reason for me to justify the fact that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. That's one way. The other way would be for you to have mentors who will continue to reassure you of the fact that you're capable, you can do this. And that way you bring your own self-confidence up, not because you have it in you, but because you're listening to someone else who's able to reaffirm positively the fact that you can do this thing. And sometimes that could be your sibling, that could be your spouse, that could be a peer, that could be someone else. But just be at that level where you have enough confidence to make it, but not too much so that you're seen as someone who believes too much in themselves and doesn't take correction. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Somebody had said, how can MANSAG replicate what some other nationals do with collaboration and development of health systems back home? And I think there's somebody in the audience who I think can perhaps even throw more light into some of these. And I'll just give a few minutes before I call on our president to give us a roundup of today. So I believe Dr. Dine Ashiru already is here. So please, if you're here and if you don't mind, can you share or can you answer that? I know you've spoken at MANSAG events, and I know you are the national lead for antimicrobial resistance, which is a big problem, not just in the West, but also in low to medium income countries. If you're there, please unmute yourself. Yeah, you are there.
Sorry, can you please repeat the question? I was
distracted. Somebody had said, how can MANSAG replicate what some other nationals do with collaboration and development of health systems back home? The reason I've called you is because of the work you do on antimicrobial resistance. You're the national lead. You may perhaps want to tell us in one sentence who you are, and then briefly address that question. And after that, Chris, be ready to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jaiyesimi. I was not expecting to go on the call, so hence,
yes, I know.
So I'm Diane. I'm lead pharmacist for antimicrobial resistance at UK Health Security Agency. I've been there for almost 14 years now. So I do lead nationally on antimicrobial stewardship activities. Some activities you may know is Antibiotic Guardian, Staff Smart Then Focus, and those are some of the things I lead on. In terms of the collaboration and international collaboration, I also for several years was global antimicrobial resistance lead for Commonwealth Pharmacists Association. And that gave an opportunity for partnerships to form between UK institutions and institutions in initially 4 countries, Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, and Zambia. And I got a lot of flack that Nigeria was not included. So by the time we got to the second round, Nigeria was included because we have a lot of, there was a lot of evidence, and NCDC was doing quite a lot of work as well. So it went to 8 countries. So I think that there are opportunities for MANSAG to, in whatever field, to seek those opportunities for funding and to collaborate and to have partnership. I think that's one way that we can practically support. I know, Professor Jaiyesimi, you have a partnership going with Babcock, I think, and Faculty of Public Health, for example, which I'm also a member of. They, through the Africa SIG, have got 3 projects, 2 in Nigeria, 1 in Ghana, 1 in Nigeria, and 1 in Kenya. And so that's an example, and it's through individuals and members of the Africa SIG who sought opportunities but made sure that Faculty of Public Health was included. So that's one example. But I think we have a lot to do, and I know that when I go on calls with colleagues in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, they do appreciate seeing somebody who looks like them, and as well as everybody else, because we're all there together. But is that partnership working?
Lovely, thank you for that. And before I hand over to our president, can I say thank you to Professor Dilly Anumba, very busy man. He might even be out of the country as we speak. To Chin for sharing your journey with us. Prof. Ivy, Erekosima, very passionate about IMGs or international medical graduates. Thank you for your talk. Christopher Okuonghae, forgive me, but I'm going to try. Okunuga, am I right? No, but okay. Don't worry. I'll take some lessons. Thank you for instilling in us the spirit of perseverance, self-belief. Oge, what can I say? You've built a practice. You're on a journey. You've shared. You've been open with us. And you've told us, you've shown us that when you have a team around you and you respect each other, then the working environment is conducive. And that's very important. And again, that's been contributory to the awards you've won. So please continue in what you're doing. Self-belief. I believe there's a lot more going to happen to Dr. Oge Ilozwe in the health sector. And so what can I say but now to hand over to the president of MANSAG, Dr. Chris Terence Agbo. Over to you, sir.
Oh, what a fantastic program. Before I just make the closing remark, I just want to answer the question that was asked about MANSAG can replicate what some other nationals do. Just to bring us up to speed with what we've been doing so far, MANSAG has been involved in a lot of collaborations in healthcare delivery system in Nigeria, both at private and public sector level. We've been involved with both all the healthcare professionals of Nigerian origin within the UK, and we do have the Association of Diaspora's Association of Healthcare Professionals, which includes other healthcare professionals in the United States, Canada, South Africa, Germany, and we are working together, all the healthcare professional association, an initiative that the primary purpose of that is to actually help to improve the healthcare delivery system in Nigeria. And we work very closely with the Federal Ministry of Health in that aspect. And most recently, what we've stepped up to do now is to see how we can do country-to-country engagement. And MANSAG, alongside with the Nurses Association in the UK and other healthcare professionals of Nigerian origin in the UK, we are trying to engage UK government to go into a bilateral agreement with the Nigerian government into UK-Nigeria Health Alliance. And this is something that some other countries are already doing that, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, India. And what it is that the UK has the responsibility to help support the healthcare system in Nigeria through workforce improvement, training, equipment, and all that. So this is one of the major projects MANSAG, alongside with other healthcare professional group of Nigerian origin, are doing. So we're doing a lot of collaboration, but we need more hands to be on deck. So we're inviting as many people that are interested to get on board. Let us just work together on how we can change the narrative. I hope that clarifies the question. I want to thank the speakers for taking our time. It's been a fantastic talks. Professor Dilly, Professor Erekosima, Chin, Oge, Chris. It's been a fantastic discussion. I think I'm very, very inspired. I'm inspired as well. And I believe that each and everyone that's been in this meeting felt the same way. And I'm hoping that the coordinator, Professor Jaiyesimi, is going to, if we can get a collation of all the presentations so that we can send it to the attendees, and also a certificate of attendance as well. Hopefully, we are going to be running this twice a year. So the next one will be coming up in September. And watch this space. We're looking for a team that will support Professor Jaiyesimi to deliver this leadership academy. Our vision for this academy is for it to go global. So it's going to be something that will be transformational. So I want us to really take it on board. If you have the skills that we need, please either get in touch with myself or Prof so that we can get a team. I'll have a robust leadership program that we can put together as an association. And we're hoping that that can also help us as a people and also help the society at large. And once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time on a Saturday, bright Saturday, to spend 3 hours to sit on this session. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And I hope to see you soon. We have our next event in London coming up just in 2 weeks' time, the summer program, and then watch out for some of our activity in MANSAG program. And if you've not registered with the association, please do subscribe with the association. Visit our website. We need all hands to be on deck so that we can make that great impact. Thank you very much, Professor Jaiyesimi, for putting this together, and all your team. We really appreciate what you've done. So thank you all and have a good day.
Lovely. Thank you, Chris. Quite honestly, I don't know what to say. I go to many meetings, and you have situations where panel members don't stay till the end. This is perhaps one of the very few meetings I've been where all panel members have stayed till the end, even in spite of the fact that we said we'll finish at 12, or we're finishing at 1. So I want to thank you again. And to the back room, Dr. Oswafo and your team, thank you for organizing this. So to all participants, again, I say thank you. We'll see you again. Enjoy the weekend. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.